everyone, welcome to the YMS Podcast. I am Colin Mansfield. I am joined, as always, by Seve Carnera here on the show. This is our second episode. We did our inaugural one a couple weeks back, specifically talking about RFID in the yard. This week, we're talking about a different topic, which is going to be focused on bolt-on yard management systems, or bolt-on YMSs. We're going to get into what that means when we say bolt-on and what are some of the factors involved. Before we do that, Seve, you want to introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. Thanks for introducing me, Colin. So yeah, my name is Seve Carnera. I am the Senior Solutions Consultant here for YMS. I am also the Director of PMO Department as well. So again, I wear a few multiple hats, which I love here. I've got over 10 years experience in the field, strictly in the YMS solutions area. I'm not shy to mention names about who I've worked with in the past, but I obviously know a lot of different solutions, as well as, some of the benefits and weaknesses and strengths of others as well, too. So that helps a lot, especially when we speak to customers. But yeah, in the nutshell, that's myself. I've been very fortunate. I've worked in this field, like I said, for 10 years, and I've done, implementations, sales, boots on the ground, you name it. Not only just here in the States, but also in Canada, Latin America, and the UK. So I've got a bunch of different stories I could share with you if you ever had the time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do have those, feel free to share them as we go through.
Sure.
Nothing says it like a story does. But
Yeah.
I've been in this industry a little bit shorter amount of time, 4 years, but even in that amount of time working with yard management solutions, our company, I've run into bolt-on YMSs quite a bit. And so I'm interested to pick your brain a little bit on this today and to make this a bit of a discussion. When we say a bolt-on, when we say, oh, this YMS is a dedicated solutions provider or a dedicated provider, this YMS is a bolt-on YMS. Seve, could you just take a few minutes to explain sort of the definition of that, what that means, and sort of when we're talking about it, what might be a bolt-on, what might not be?
Sure. So typically, a bolt-on solution from a YMS perspective is one that is basically added on to another product, typically a WMS system or a TMS system, and they add that sort of YMS functionality to the solution to be able to sell that to customers as well. The challenge with some of those things, though, is that those solutions are not the manufacturers of those products' main source of revenue, main focus of where they're really trying to get customers. So it's really thought is done as an afterthought to sort of suffice customers that are looking for those types of solutions that want it attached to their WMS system, for example. And that eliminates the need to do integrations into other systems. It's all within one platform, and that does make it somewhat helpful. As compared to a standalone YMS solution, such as ourselves and other competitors out there in the field, in that it's an actual built YMS strictly for the purposes of running your yards. So most of those organizations don't necessarily have a WMS or a TMS system. All they sell is strictly a YMS solution. And as a result of that, they can focus all their energies on that type of solution. So, the majority of them have been in business for, over 10 years. They know the layouts of yards. They know the complexities of yards. They know the challenges it is to have communications with not just your drivers out in the yard, but also live drivers, individuals within the warehouse. So it's a much more specialized type of YMS solution than your traditional bolt-on solution. That's really, again, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but it's really just an afterthought of a solution to have added to their main product.
I think that's a phenomenal definition. I think about in software in general, there are dedicated providers and there's sort of like all-in-one providers. Maybe from a consumer standpoint, a good example of that might be like a calendar app, right? You might have a calendar app and all it does is your calendar, but you could have a calendar app and it does tasks and it does to-dos and it does, invites, digital meetings. It does all these other things. Now, is one better than the other? Well, that's up to the consumer ultimately, right? That's up to the person making that decision. But
Right.
we see this in not only in B2B in the business world, but we also see this on the consumer side as well. And I think when we start talking about bolt-ons, it's important to note that there are companies out there who have different verticals in their company, where a YMS is still a dedicated solution. It's still one of their main products or their main product, but they have other verticals as well that they offer, that they support. Whereas when we say a bolt-on, we're not really referring to that. We're referring to a company where their primary means of getting business, their primary product, is something else that's not a YMS. And the YMS is added on. Not perhaps they might consider it their own vertical, but when you look at the feature set and you look at the cost and you look at what it does and how it does it, it falls well short of many of the other systems that are out there, often dedicated systems. So important distinction there. If you go to a company's website and it's the YMS isn't the first thing on the page, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bolt-on, but it's an indicator. It's a potential indicator. Um,
Sure.
a lot of companies that tend to implement a YMS as a bolt-on, when we say they're offering us something other than a YMS, typically those are warehouse management systems like WMSs or transportation management systems, TMSs. They could also be other ERP type systems, dock management systems, those sorts of things. But traditionally, when we say bolt-on, we're really referring to WMSs or TMSs that go, oh, sure, we got a YMS. Um, Before we get into some of the decision-making, options criteria that a company may be looking for when they're looking for a YMS and why they might be considering a bolt-on, um, one thing that I did want to additionally highlight is that it's a bit, and I noticed this when I first got into the industry about 4.5 years ago, is the yard, when you just look at the yard on its surface, it seems very simple, right? It seems, oh, we bring trailers in, we put them in a spot, and then we bring them to the door, and then they leave. It seems very, very simple on the surface. But as any yard operator will tell you, and any facility that's out there that runs any sort of substantial yard will tell you, is it gets very complicated very quickly. For all the reasons that a warehouse gets complicated as well. You've got lots of different stakeholders involved. You've got lots of different types of trailers, types of product, scheduling to take care of. You got backups at the gate. You've got yard checks. You've got jockey drivers to manage. And there's all of these different components that can get very complicated. What's interesting to me is typically when I've run into or rubbed shoulders with a provider that has a bolt-on YMS solution, when I've gone to their website or when I've seen them at trade shows, it's almost as if they're treating the yard as a very simple thing to solve. And oh yeah, we do that. We also solve the yard deal. And I think it's a bit of a disservice to how complex this area of logistics and supply chain can be. Is it complicated for every operation? No, it's not. But it can certainly get very complicated. We've had customers, who have been paying $500,000, $1 million, $2 million or more on just detention charges in the yard.
Yeah.
And if that sounds like a simple problem to fix, well, tell that to the person who's writing that $1 million check, right?
Right.
So I wanted to highlight that. Now let's talk about a little bit, why do companies typically pick a bolt-on YMS, or why is it one that they're considering in their decision making? I'm going to rely on you for this, Seve, because you've talked to many more companies than I have who are in this process.
Yeah, a great question, Colin. And I wish I knew the silver bullet answer to this, but I think what it comes down to is that organizations invest so much in an ERP, a WMS system, that they feel, what, if we really need to add some additional functionality, or that functionality already exists in there that we already may be paying for, why not just go ahead and use it? And in those cases, I get that, but to your point, no yard is simplistic enough to have some of those solutions in place that's going to suffice all the different areas that a true YMS solution can do. You mentioned a couple of features and modules that already stick out in my mind. A lot of other things include things like reefer checks. How often can you go out there and check a reefer? How often do you have to go out there and identify how much fuel is left in that reefer unit? Can you do things like a dock bump? Things that most organizations aren't aware of, or are just building upon a very simplistic, simple layer of a YMS solution. A lot of those solutions as well too don't have that interaction where you can communicate with, let's say, for example, live drivers or even the yard drivers as well too. So it makes it easier for those organizations to say, hey, we're either already paying for that solution already, or we're going to get that solution added on for a minimal cost as compared to going out and getting a full YMS solution. Let's go ahead and do that. And for some organizations, I mean, something is better than nothing, obviously. But in the long run, you really start to identify where those systems have shortcomings. And speaking of stories that I was mentioning earlier, and actually you were part of this story with me as well. And I've had this happen to me as well many times. We go to a trade show and we're there, we're showing our product, et cetera, et cetera. And then we get, a little bit of peering eyes from a WMS vendor or a TMS vendor, and they come over. And what do they want? They may want to build a relationship with us. Why is that? Because they have customers that have come to them and said, you know what? Great, I love the YMS that you have in there, but it's not going to be sufficient for our needs. We're really truly looking for a true YMS solution where we can have the whole, broad spectrum of all the different modules that are associated with a typical standalone YMS solution. So those vendors come over, and what do? Hey, can we have your card? Occasionally we have customers that our solution isn't what the right fit for them, and we'd like to have, build some sort of a mutual agreement between us that we can work together and create just relationships that way. So I know that you were part of a conversation with me
Mm-hmm.
at a last trade show that we went to, and I just want to share that that's typically something that happens very common. It's not something that's a very uncommon thing that happens. I will share with you as well too that I've worked for so many YMS solutions or organizations that I'll often get asked, hey, is there anything that you can do inside the four walls? And my recommendation and my response to that has always been, look, there are some very, very good solutions out there that can handle that. That is not what we do. So us as a YMS solution, and YMS is an organization, Yard Management Solutions, we don't want to get into the four walls because, again, there's software packages that do a very, very good job of making sure that those things inside those four walls are managed. Whereas we specialize in what's going on outside. So, again, I think those are some of the reasons that some organizations choose to go in that direction. I'm not saying that it's a bad decision, but I'm just saying that it may lead to organizations identifying again that there's some shortcomings with those systems.
Yep. Well, and I keep coming back to a lot of the companies that we speak with. I mentioned this on the last episode as well. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to it. Seve had some hot takes on there that, whoo, spicy. Uh, I, I I always think about this: how companies, when they come to us, they're generally not doing poorly at yard management in terms of they're doing their best, right? They're doing the best with the tools that they have. And what they found often is that they've outgrown their manual methods, their processes, their spreadsheets, their pieces of paper, their whiteboards, their whatever. And so they come looking for a solution that is going to bring them to the next level or allow them to continue accelerating at the same pace they've been accelerating. And the reason why I say that is because just like if I'm a project manager and I'm managing a very complicated project with lots of tasks and subtasks and people to assign things to and due dates and all of that, I probably wouldn't use, a standard to-do list app on my phone to track that project. I would probably go out and I would look for what software is going to really help me the most. What's going to be the best tool to help manage this project? And there's some great tools out there for it. In the same way, when companies come to us looking to go to the next level, my opinion, and based on what I've heard from clients and talking to folks at trade shows, and to your point, Seve, WMS vendors themselves is often, well, could you do a bolt-on? Yes, you could. But is that really going to get you to the next level? No. And I would hate for somebody to do an implementation, spend all the resources if it's an RFP or they're comparing and it's often a multi-month process of choosing a vendor, only to find out, oh, in another year we're going to need something else because this isn't sufficient. So I come back to, and to your point, you said something is better than nothing. That was one of the questions that I wanted to talk about today, because I think it's a very valuable point. Is something better than nothing? Yeah, absolutely. Having some resource is always going to be better than not. But are you going to end up paying for that sunk cost fallacy later on when you go, well, now we're spent this much money and On the bolt-on YMS, it's not doing what we need. Do we now spend more to get another system? It becomes harder and harder to make that decision. I would say it's better early on to identify what are our needs now and what will they be a year from now, 2 years from now, looking backwards to allow you to project forwards, uh, and make that decision based on the data that's available to you. Um, in most cases where I'm talking to a company and they're considering various options, they do not end up selecting a bolt-on YMS system. It happens, but I will tell you that head to head, when you look at all of the factors involved, including cost, dedicated YMS vendors in the yard will come out on top. That's the opinion of Colin. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know, but that's the opinion of Colin. I'd be interested to hear if you echo that, Seve, or if you have a different thought.
No. I totally agree with you. It's not a hot take at all. I totally agree with you. It's good that there's additional business and competitors out there in the competitive landscape for all this because it just makes all of us that much better. But again, the big thing that I really want to emphasize is that, I've prided myself for the past 10 years in doing nothing but yard management solutions, not the organization itself, but just general yard solutions. And, when you do that, I've loved the fact that the solutions that I've worked with has strictly just focused in on yards. And that obviously has made me what most people would consider an expert in the field. I like to just consider myself that I'm very mature in the field, I guess is the best way of saying it. But at the end of the day, those standalone solutions really, really bring a lot to the table for those organizations that have very unique, very robust operations out in the yard. And they don't even have to necessarily be unique, but they have to be operations that are dealing with, lots of ins and outs, inbounds and outbound type loads, as far as making sure that they have product at dock doors when they need it, especially for a manufacturing operation. When you have a manufacturing operation and you're working on just in time, it's very important that you have product at dock doors at the right time and at the right place so that you keep that operations keep running and you don't bring down those lines. Again, with a standalone YMS solutions, we specialize in those types of operations, those types of activities, and that's what really sets us apart from those bolt-on solutions. So, you're right. It's a shame if an organization goes through all the trouble of identifying what their needs are and then settling for a bolt-on solution because it's the cheaper route to go. YMS is not always the most sexiest thing out there. WMS or an ERP is always going to outwin a YMS solution. But at the end of the day, it can make such a huge difference in your operations on a day-to-day basis that, I think would surprise a lot of folks, number one. And secondly, when you have those standalone solutions, again, you can just multiply those types of activities by the offerings that those solutions bring versus a bolt-on that may be limited in what they offer.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I will say I've talked to clients who would disagree with you on the sexy aspect. That they would say their WMS system is as far from sexy as it gets.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I understand your point. I understand.
Yep.
Especially in the space where you look at, if you're standing up a new operation, what are the things that you're going to look at first? Well, how do I even organize product inside of the warehouse, right? And then turn the attention to the yard. I would say that the yard is always worthwhile investing in, even from day one. But a lot of companies have traditionally looked at the yard as a bit of an afterthought or a black hole. And so, part of what I've loved about being a part of this company and a part of this sort of side of the industry, learning from people like you, Seve, is kind of capturing what are the benefits of a dedicated YMS solution, and then the educational aspect, going to trade shows, being on podcasts, talking to people. I had the chance to go to one of the Freight Waves events last year and meet truck drivers who were complaining that they're sitting at these gates for all kinds of time. Then they get in, then they got to wait for hours before they get a dock door. And I go, well, here's the good news.
Yeah.
These facilities, you should send them my way because I got something for them. When we think about the benefits of a dedicated YMS, and we've outlined some of the modules, kind of broadly speaking, from your standpoint, Seve, when you think about sort of, okay, something's better than nothing, but a YMS is a whole lot better than nothing. In fact, it's really a dedicated YMS is really the optimal solution there. What are some of the benefits that you would say are going to, if a company's just making this decision, what's going to point them in the right direction of choosing a dedicated vendor over a bolt-on solution? It could be features, or it could be, end results. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Colin. So yeah, I mean, obviously you really want to focus in on from the get-go on the gate. If you can focus in on the gate and understand what's coming in and what's leaving, and you have a good understanding of what inventory of the trailers, equipment you have in the yard, that's a great start. And any YMS solution that calls itself a YMS solution has to start from that area, first off. And then from there, you just build on to add additional features, functionalities based on different types of operations, different types of, organizations and how they run their operations. So, it's a matter of then just scaling it based on those types of operations and their different functions that they do within that, within that yard. But it can be a challenge sometimes to identify those things uh, from a customer standpoint when they don't have the expertise to necessarily identify that. And that's why it's great that they can reach out to individuals like ourselves that are experts in this field that have seen many different things and can then provide them with solutions as well too. So you're absolutely right. I mean, not everyone understands the field as well as a lot of us that have been doing this for a while. You're
Mhm.
right. It's not a very difficult task. All we're trying to do is get traders in a yard, get them to dock doors and off a dock door. Now, obviously, it's not that simple many times, but at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. In addition to trying to do that in the best way possible. So, it's a challenge, and to your point, I would hope that organizations do their homework, identify what the top needs are for that organization when they choose a product. And then once they choose that product, that they pick a product that absolutely knocks it out of the park in those areas that they need the help in.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear a lot of when companies will come to us, and especially on the bolt-on side, and they'll say, "Well, do you have any recommendations, or do you have any references that we can speak to that have used your system?" I love that question. That's one of my favorite questions in the world. We always joke, our customers are our best salesmen. So if I would highly recommend any company that's doing this investigative work do that. But I would also recommend do it on the other side as well. Reach out to contacts in the industry that you may have who have that bolt on, and ask them questions. We don't always have access to those people, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not our customer. But as you're doing that research, talk to other folks in the industry, reach out on LinkedIn or similar platforms, or just through personal connections, and say, hey, our company's considering a multitude of yard management options. We've got X WMS, and we're thinking about going with their bolt-on YMS. Has anybody worked with this before, right? Salesmen are going to tell you what salesmen need to tell you to get you through the finish line there. So it's important, I think, to sort of, ask vendors, but also go out and ask real people. And any good vendor will be able to point you to those real people as well, so that you can have that, frank discussion with them. So,
Sure.
when we think about bolt-on, I would, I guess, refer to what we said at the end of the last episode, which is, do your homework, talk to resources and references from any vendors you're considering. And then of course, go out and, if you can, see if you can get eyes on the system itself. We've had lots of customers come to us and go, one of the biggest benefits of your system is an intangible, really, which is that it's easy to learn and simple to use. And I think any system that you have to sit there and get trained on it for days and days and days and days and days, and you're still not really sure what everything does, can be a challenge from a change management perspective and from new people coming in. If you can get something that's just dead simple and somebody can sit down and just kind of learn it, that's one of those things that might not make the slide deck every time, but is a huge win in terms of, implementation at your company.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great
Wrapping up
point.
here, Seve.
Let me
Yeah.
just add one
Anything
other
else
thing
you got?
too. Yeah, I was just going to mention because you brought up a good point as well too. A lot of times I am surprised by customers who, when I'm demoing a solution and they see features like our Eagle View, or basically a map of the facility with where the trailers are sitting in the yard, with color coordination for telling you, hey, which trailers are out of service, which ones are loaded, which ones are empty, which ones are live drivers, which ones have certain product in them. That type of visuals are typically not included in bolt-ons, and that really sets the YMS solution standalone, sets them apart because they can afford to be able to display that type of information to an end user. And in many times, those are showstoppers. I mean, they literally will say, whoa, I had no idea that these solutions provided those types of services. In addition to that, a lot of times what I've seen as well too, detention and demurrage, reefer management, those are two big areas that a lot of our customer base that comes to us prior to becoming customers and are not aware that our solutions can take care of some of those issues as well too. So I just wanted to point those two, three features out, especially the maps, and the communication with yard drivers as well too, because in a nutshell, those are really things that sets standalone solutions apart from those that are bolt on.
Yep. Oh, those are great call outs there. It really does. You got to dive into the details, and you really
Yeah,
got to look at the solution from a holistic standpoint. And sometimes, just going on a website isn't good enough, right? You
yeah.
gotta really, not only from a demo perspective, but, talk to other folks who have used it in the past. Um, okay. So if you're interested, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're interested in having a discussion more, maybe you are in the market looking for a YMS. Maybe you just like this stuff like Seve and I do, and you just love talking about it and love. If that's you, reach out to us. We'd love to talk. We're on LinkedIn. Both Seve and I are on LinkedIn. You can find our company, Yard Management Solutions, on LinkedIn, as well as on our website, yardmanagementsolutions.com. Um, Look, if you just want to talk and you don't want to be sold to, we're not going to sell to you. We'd love to just chat. If you want to come on the show, we'd love to have you on the show. We're going to be doing these podcast episodes about every couple weeks. And we'd love to, bring a third person on here to pick their brains and to have a discourse. So if that's you, love to have you on here. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. There's lots of fun stuff coming up here in our neck of the woods. There's trade shows on the horizon. Maybe we'll do a podcast while we're at the trade show and pull some people into that. That could be fun out at Modex there in Atlanta, Georgia. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to doing this again next time.
Thanks, Colin.